CatSynth TV.
What's up, everybody? JB here for CatSynth TV. Today we're going to be taking a look at one of the more interesting collaborations that I can think of, something that came out a while back and still kind of piques my interest and my imagination at times. Of course, I'm talking about the collaboration between Debbie Harry and H.R. Giger. One of those unexpected kind of collaborations and one of these really amazing things. A lot of amazing stuff came out of it. And so we're calling this episode Beauty and the Beast. You know what I'm talking about, for obvious reasons. Before we get started on that, I want to ask you to please subscribe to this channel for more cultural content coming out regularly. Please consider underwriting the efforts. There are links to Patreon, Ko-Fi, merch, all that down there below. You see the links and whatnot. And if you like what you see here, please share this thing out, give it a thumbs up, leave us a comment, tell us what you enjoyed, tell us what you didn't enjoy. You know what I mean? Tell us what you want to see next. Okay, let's go right into this. H.R. Giger and Debbie Harry. One of those kind of, collaborations that, before it happened, like on paper, you'd be thinking, what? That really doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but some really incredible stuff came out of it. We're going to be taking a look not only at the album, which features the artwork, the album called KooKoo, of course, but we're going to be taking a look at a book that came out just a couple years ago called Metamorphosis, creating the visual identity for KooKoo, et cetera, a book by Chris Stein, who was Debbie Harry's partner at the time, co-songwriter in Blondie, guitarist in Blondie, et cetera. All right, so let's look at the album cover right there. Almost without a doubt, I'm sure you've seen this album cover somewhere. If you've ever seen one of those Rolling Stone 100 greatest album covers of all times, you'll see this on here. And it's really just an amazing image. It's startling. It gets your attention. At the time, it was somewhat edgy, however you want to say it. H.R. Giger, let's backtrack a little bit. H.R. Giger, of course, the Swiss artist, Swiss kind of surrealist, kind of disturbing surrealist. I'm not sure how you'd classify his work exactly, but he's the one who kind of gave rise to what is known as biomechanical art, that kind of art that fuses the biological and the mechanical, as the word would imply right there. Probably most widely known to people around the world for his work designing the alien in the original Alien film and a couple of the subsequent films and whatnot, right? We see that image there. Debbie Harry, of course, or Deborah Harry, as she prefers to be known these days, but we're going to go with Debbie Harry since that's how she's billed on the album and whatnot. Debbie Harry, the singer for Blondie, right? Picture of Blondie right there. Fantastic band. I'm a big fan, you know what I mean? Around 1980, 81, she decided it was time to strike out on her own, and so she started working on a solo album, something that would become the KooKoo album. Right about the same time, in the spring of 1980, Debbie Harry and Chris Stein went to go see an opening of the art that H.R. Giger created for the Alien film, which he subsequently won the Academy Award for. See a picture of him here with his Academy Award, et cetera. It was in New York City right there, right down around the corner from their house. The gallery premiere was sponsored by the publisher of Omni Magazine, also the publisher of Penthouse Magazine. You know what I'm talking about? Bob Guccione. Hey, Bob Guccione. Hey, you see that picture right there? Hey, Bob. You know what I'm talking about? So they went there. They met H.R. Giger, or Hans Rudi Giger, as is his name. They really, hit it off with him. And I guess Giger apparently, after this opening, accompanied Chris Stein and Guccione to a showing of Caligula. Hey, you know what I'm talking about. I don't want to get too distracted right now, but we are going to have an upcoming video on Caligula, so please stay tuned for that. Yeah, back to the story at hand. They met they talked about collaborating. And so once the album was completed in 1981, the album that would become KooKoo, Giger was contacted about doing some album art. Actually, I guess he started the album art while the album was still in process. In any case, amazing art. Let's talk about the album a little bit right here real quick. Okay, so KooKoo, 1981, Debbie Harry solo album. Look at the front cover here. Again, that very striking image. This album was produced by Nile Rodgers and Bernard Edwards. Nile Rodgers and Bernard Edwards, for those who don't know, you know what I mean, kind of the songwriting and production team behind Chic. Nile Rodgers, the guitarist and composer for that band. Bernard Edwards, the bassist and composer for that band. And those two actually, in addition to doing the production for this album, actually co-wrote about half of those tunes. Some of them in collaboration with Debbie Harry and Chris Stein. Some of them entirely composed by them. This is a great album. Apparently this album did not do big business when it came out, or at least it went gold as I understand it, but it did not meet the commercial expectations that everyone was hoping for. So it didn't quite break her as a solo artist at the time. But, you know, maybe that was just a matter of timing, because this is a great album. I mean, Blondie always had that kind of funk thing going, especially on tunes like Rapture and all that, the later stuff, and kind of branching out into different things. But this album is really solid, funky rock R&B. Fantastic, really hard-hitting stuff. And of course, Nile Rodgers would make this sound, you know, a couple years later, you know, when he worked with David Bowie on Bowie's Let's Dance, which took that same kind of sound that we hear here, kind of rock, funk, R&B, a little bit of disco, and bam, made it into this huge commercial success. So maybe, like I said, it was just a matter of timing. You know, amazing musicians on this. You know, the crew from Chic are all there. You know, Bernard Edwards, Nile Rodgers, as I said earlier, Tony Thompson. And wow, this guy is just an amazing drummer. Just with a lead foot, man, you really just bam, down at there. Manolo Badrena on percussion. Manolo Badrena, you know that name from Weather Report on percussion. You know, Mark and Jerry from Devo actually do some backing vocals on this. Really great album. Standout tracks, of course, are the singles that were released from this album. Backfired and Now I Know You Know. Great tunes. Backfired, super funky, nice kind of Earth, Wind & Fire, kind of horn hit kind of thing going on it. And Now I Know You Know, really beautiful jazz kind of influenced ballad. Really nice horn progression on there. I'm actually a big fan of there's a tune on there also called Chrome with kind of a heavier guitar sound. You know, I'm thinking about, you know, there was that one collaboration that Blondie did with Robert Fripp, you know, Fade Away and Radiate, but Fripp was doing more of his atmospheric kind of thing on that. I always wonder if, you know, that later Crimson sound, that heavy kind of chunky guitar made it onto a Blondie album. That might be what it sounded like. Okay, but fantastic album, worth seeking out. You know, please do check it out. But let's get back to what we're talking about, the collaboration. Okay, so as the album was finishing, they started, that is to say, Debbie Harry and Chris Stein contacted Giger again about doing some album cover art, and he agreed, of course. H.R. Giger did a few album covers before this. Most famously, you see this one on screen here. You've seen this before. Emerson, Lake and Palmer's Brain Salad Surgery. That was kind of a big calling card for him. But also this one, this Magma album, Attack. One of my favorite albums. This is a great album. If you don't know this album, go check this one out. This is a fantastic album. But he wasn't as well known for doing album cover work. Of course, you know, a couple years later, he started licensing out his artwork for album covers and became more associated with kind of music on the more heavy metal side of things, if you like. I'm thinking about like these albums here, Celtic Frost. He did this one. He did this Danzig album you see on the screen here. He also did this one over here for Carcass, right? just, the imagery is more associated with that kind of dark, disturbing thing. And so that's what kind of made this collaboration really fascinating and interesting to me. Okay, let's look again at the album cover for the Debbie Harry album. Now you can see here, it's Giger's art. He actually airbrushed on top of a photograph. There are two different stories as far as where the idea for the imagery of the needles came through. The main story that I'm reading in the book and so forth is that the needles kind of, Giger had a acupuncture treatment recently, and he was kind of fascinated by the needles and whatnot. But also because Debbie Harry was associated with the punk movement, of course, coming out of the 1970s CBGBs, kind of scene and whatnot, as well as the Ramones and Talking Heads and whatnot, etc. Kind of thinking of her as a punk priestess, something like that. I remember that was the quote that I heard for a long time, and the kind of stereotype of the punk for the long time was the safety pin going through the face, etc., etc. An image that, interestingly, Giger had used in some of his earlier art, kind of predating the whole punk movement. But in any case, he came up with these fantastic images. We see the front and back cover images here, some of the other things that were created. He sent some Polaroids of what he was working on to Debbie Harry and Chris Stein. They were fascinated by it. They actually went over to Switzerland and met up with him at his studio. And we're just going to flip through the book here. Again, this is Chris Stein's book, Metamorphosis, all about this kind of collaboration. And we see Giger's house, kind of unassuming from the outside, but inside, a house of horrors, if you like. I mean, again, Giger's work has that kind of disturbing, unsettling element to it. It's got this, some people get really turned off by it. Some people get queasy looking at it. He uses this very limited color palette for the most part, at least at this time. What he was doing, kind of these muted grays and greens and browns, as we see here, some examples of his artwork. Ooh, boy, I'm telling you, crazy, crazy stuff. So we got these fantastic images that were coming out. So one of the more interesting things that perhaps not as widely known about this collaboration is that there are actually two video promos shot for this album, and they were actually directed by H.R. Giger. So in addition to creating these sort of visuals, kind of surrounding Debbie Harry, he also directed these videos. And we're just going to see a short excerpt from one right here. We see H.R. Giger on the screen here. Possibly the only time he ever had an acting role, right? I mean, he's appeared on a number of different documentaries and so forth. An amazing documentary you should check out, as a little side note, is Jodorowsky's Dune, all about Alejandro Jodorowsky's attempt to film a sprawling science fiction epic in the mid-1970s, pre-Star Wars. Go check that out, but he's interviewed at length in there. In any case, Giger did these incredible videos. I remember seeing the video for Backfired, the one that we see a little bit of right here on screen. I don't think I saw it on MTV back in the day because it was kind of a little disturbing. I think I saw it late at night on one of those cable TV shows. You know what I mean? And it just baffled me. It completely confused me because I was unaware of the album at the time. And then just the kind of disconnect between the music and the imagery on here is just really one of the strangest things. There was a BBC interview around the same time. You can see a little bit of that here.
Does this girl look serious?
She looks serious.
The second video that was filmed for this collaboration was, again, for the lovely ballad, Now I Know You Know. And I'm telling you, if there was a kind of a disconnect between the music and the imagery for Backfired, it's even more extreme for this particular song. Now I know you know this beautiful tune, but Debbie Harry kind of with a black wig on, so I mean unrecognizable to most people. Plus she's got her face painted. She's wearing this bodysuit. We see her dancing around in this Giger environment right here. At the end of it, we see her sitting in a Harkonnen chair. Again, this is a prop that was built for the Jodorowsky's Dune film, but never used, of course. Amazing stuff, amazing stuff. We also see some of that in the book here. So one of those collaborations that, again, seemed really unlikely and seemed somehow to have a little bit of a dissonance, but it worked so beautifully. There was some controversy, or controversy, if you like, you want to pronounce it the British way, about this album cover. I guess it was going to be displayed on advertisements in London, etc., and it was pulled because the imagery was so disturbing at the time. At least at the time, of course, this sort of imagery has become a little bit more commonplace in the subsequent years. But one of these things that, like I said, boy, this is really kind of odd and unusual, but it's kind of fascinating to me. Beautiful, beautiful stuff. Unfortunately, they never collaborated in that way again, but they stayed fast friends for many years until Giger's death some years ago. And one could only wish for another kind of collaboration of this nature to come. But sometimes you just can't capture lightning in a bottle twice, you know what I'm talking about? And so we have all of these things, the album KooKoo, the book that we're looking at here, Metamorphosis, and of course, the music and the enduring power of the imagery to go with. So I hope you've enjoyed this little kind of delve into one of the more peculiar bits of music history. I really enjoyed preparing this for you, and if you want to see another one of this, give us a suggestion of what you'd like to see next, right down there in the comments.
To find out more about the work of Debbie Harry and H.R. Giger, please visit their respective websites and check out the description below this video. Thanks for watching, and please subscribe to CatSynth TV.
Hey, you're watching CatSynth TV!